Did you know that Jesus said that it's impossible for a rich person to get into heaven? In the three synoptic gospels, there's a story where Jesus says that it is easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to get into the kingdom of heaven. Now, if you're a Christian, there's probably a good chance you've heard that Jesus wasn't actually talking about a literal camel or a literal needle. Rather, he was referring to a special gate in the wall at Jerusalem called the Needle's Eye. A tiny little gate that you had to basically take all your belongings off, and it would be really difficult to get through, but you'd be able to get through it. The only problem with this interpretation is it's completely made up. There is absolutely no archaeological evidence nor any literary evidence that any such gate existed in Jerusalem or anywhere else. So how did we get this story? Well, one theory is that in the medieval period, tour guides would take pilgrims and other visitors around and would show them a gate and would call this gate the Needle's Eye. Why would they do this? Well, a lot of the activity in and around Jerusalem was funded by European lords, ladies, and kings. And so the theory goes that over time, Jesus' teachings about money and wealth were softened so as not to offend wealthy patrons. Of course, this is just one theory. Scholars have pointed out that the expression the needle's eye has appeared in various medieval texts. Some even say it dates all the way back to the 3rd century, but this is still very much disputed by scholars. One thing is for certain, this passage has been used over the years to soften Jesus' message about money. What appears at first to be an incredibly harsh critique of wealthy people is softened a little bit if you interpret it in a different way, by saying it's not that you can't get into heaven if you're wealthy, it's that you have to humble yourself before God and acknowledge Him as the Lord above all, then you can get into heaven. But if you take this passage at face value, it does come off incredibly harsh. And this is further reinforced by the fact that the disciples likewise respond with disbelief and wonder. In fact, they say to Jesus, well, if that's the case, then how can anybody be saved? And I think it's in this moment that we need to focus. Because what Jesus is doing here is not providing some kind of systematic theology for how one can be saved. He's using hyperbole to make a point. What is that point? That wealth, if not put in its proper place, can become like a god, whether you are a follower of the God of Abraham or not. And that by relying on one's wealth, one negates the need for a higher power, somebody outside themselves, and therefore cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Going back to what the disciples said, they say, well, if this is the case, then can anybody at all be saved? Jesus says to them, this is impossible with man, but with God, nothing is impossible. The point of this story is not to find the correct interpretation. The point of the story is to shock us. But more than just shock us, it's to make us think, to make us ponder. What place does wealth have in our lives? How much do we rely on it? And if we were truly honest with ourselves, how much does wealth live up to its promises of peace, happiness, and contentment?